Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Planning and Zoning Special Meeting for Tuesday, October 17th, 2023. Our first item of business is Pledge of Allegiance. If everyone could please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I thought we could have gotten a flagpole with the windows, you know.
I will put it in our requisition spot. As soon as I figure out where that is.
And we'll get right into it. Our new business is discussion regarding the planned conservation development with our consultant, Plan Slam Plan. And I'll turn it over to our representative. Good evening. Who's running with it?
Start us off tonight. Pat Gallagher with SLAM, aka Slamometrics. Thanks for having us tonight. Glenn Calder with me here as well. So tonight we're going to focus on our infrastructure element, so our last planning element before we kind of pivot into phase 2 of the project, which is actually putting together a draft of your plan. So after that, if we have some time, we want to discuss some potential special focus areas. We have just an idea that we kind of floated internally to run by you, but certainly open to other suggestions if the commission feels other issues are more pressing. And then finalize our kind of next steps and schedule as we head into the next phase of the project. So we are here in October, wrapping up our infrastructure elements, so right on track in terms of where we want to be. And as I mentioned, this is kind of the end of phase 1 of our project. We're really kind of on our fact-finding mission, trying to collect a lot of data, and then we'll be pivoting into plan development, which is really focused on kind of that forward-thinking, priorities over the next 10 years. Our next meeting is scheduled for December, and that's going to be a working meeting focused on the draft future land use plan, some ideas around that, as well as some initial goals, objectives, and priorities, and also finalizing the structure of the document. I know we had talked about that a little bit over the last few months, how we want to incorporate the sustainability element, so we'll finalize that in December as well. And then our next public outreach period is really going to be once we hit the new year, once we have some draft goals, objectives, strategies, priorities, give the public a chance to weigh in on those priorities before we put together the draft plan. So tonight's infrastructure elements focused on 3 parts: community facilities, utilities, and transportation. And we'll start with community facilities, and this information was largely gathered from various town capital planning documents, as well as the interviews and questionnaires that we did with various department heads earlier in the year. So your last plan, was really about kind of some overarching goals around guiding the location of investments and making sure there's sufficient planning around long-term goals. We think those are still worthy strategies. In terms of the actual investments, the school system was clearly the main driver of your capital funds. And as we move into the next 10-year period, we certainly see some other needs beyond the school system that the town will need to look into. So the next couple of slides are just going over the various town facilities based on our initial interviews with staff. And starting with the town hall and the town hall annex. So the town hall, built in 1968, gone through kind of improvements on an as-needed basis, largely keeping the building functioning, safe, and it's a building that is aging, in need of updates, as obviously we can see with the ongoing window replacements. And you're using the space well, but it's also not a building that has a ton of space to support future growth. And so there is the potential need for either a more major renovation, just based on the vintage of the building, as well. And if an undertaking like that is done, it may also be worth considering looking at ways to potentially expand the building should you need to grow your staff or your offerings over the next 10 years. And there is some room on this site, so that's always one of the limiting factors when we're looking at community facilities is, do you have adequate land to support an addition, extra parking, program expansion, This site is fairly well suited to that. The annex was recently renovated, currently houses your emergency operations center, offers some overflow space as well, and so we don't anticipate any major needs with that facility over the next 10 years on, except for your typical maintenance items. We met with the police chief, and he kind of gave us an update on their facility. It was built in 1984. Right now, they're doing some fit out of the space to build new locker rooms. I don't believe there was a women's locker room, so this is building a space for the female officers, and really a critical renovation on their part. But that's taken away space that they used for storage and equipment, and so they're really at a premium, and feel that their space is not sufficient to support any growth in staff of the department. They're on a little bit tighter of a site, and they're surrounded by some wetlands, and they may have some room on site for a small addition, so that may need to be studied as part of kind of your next steps and planning process. And then in addition to the police department facility, the town's continuing to make upgrades to its emergency communication system. New towers, I believe, if they're not already built, planned for the animal control facility in the northern end of town. Trax facility, the animal control facility, no major items were noted as part of our assessment. There's an annual budget for capital improvements, and that's largely going to be to continue operating on an as-is basis. The fire department, we didn't get a chance to meet with the fire department folks, so we are doing some follow-up with them. They are a volunteer fire company, 130 members, and like a lot of volunteer fire departments, I think a continuing issue is going to be to make sure that they have adequate staff to serve the community. This isn't particular to South Windsor, but I know many volunteer fire departments have a aging volunteer corps, and getting kind of the next generation of volunteers in is certainly crucial, especially in a growing community like South Windsor. And town staff did note that there is some shared services in terms of facility maintenance, but that the volunteers largely are responsible for maintaining the day-to-day maintenance of those buildings. That would be something to consider.
Any discussion of having more paid staff, more paid firefighters for working hours or whatever?
That certainly could be something the town could look at. I don't know enough, since we didn't meet with them, to know kind of how critical their situation is. I'm just speaking kind of more globally about volunteering.
When you do have a chance to meet with them, there has been conversations, even when Matt Galligan was town manager, about daytime staffing, paid daytime staffing, because of our aging volunteers, so.
Yeah, certainly that'll be a follow-up question when we meet with them.
You have a green dot, and it says follow-up needed. Shouldn't that be a yellow dot then, or?
Yeah, certainly. So we can make that change, and that was largely from a facility standpoint. The facilities seem to be in decent shape, but the staffing thing obviously is a big consideration. We'll just have to meet with them and before we kind of finalize this, have that discussion with
I think
them.
it might be red by the time you're done talking to
Well, you might be right.
them. I know quite a few of them. I think you're gonna be towards the red.
Okay. Public Works was another facility that we put into the yellow category. So some issues to consider through 2034. It's located at the former landfill site. The garage was built in 1960, expanded in the 90s, and the salt shed added in 2002. And there are some site constraints given that it is an old landfill. So there's certain parts of the site that just don't support any buildings or support functions. And the garage is beyond design capacity. Like a lot of departments, the vehicles that you have and that you're storing are much larger, and you have more of them than when the garage was designed for. And so some of those vehicles are stored outside, which decreases the lifespan of them. So it's an issue that certainly needs to be considered. They are also interested in potentially expanding what types of services they offer. So for example, organics removal, they're doing more of that. And so they need more outdoor space, lay down space for mulch, vegetation, storm cleanup, etc. And the biggest challenge for them is going to be having adequate land to support the expansion, given the constraints of the existing site. They had discussed with the adjacent property owner to the south about buying a piece of land, but I guess that negotiation didn't come to fruition. But there's other properties adjacent to that site that may want to be acquired as well to help support their long-range planning.
Didn't we, excuse me, did we not purchase any,
We just got a couple acres just north of the,
You wanna be Stephanie Dexter?
town
or
hall.
Matt
I mean, I'm sorry,
Town
the
garage.
garage, yeah.
What do you
Yes,
think?
there's land that they just recently purchased last year.
and then, cause there was gonna be a, organic, composting,
No, this was just, I think the idea is for another storage facility. But it hasn't come into any.
and there, but the land is for sale now at the fork of Strong and,
Correct, there's a 3-acre piece that's been offered to the town, and so that is going through the process of being reviewed. The Open Space Task Force reviewed it, and it will go to the town council for consideration. So then we would pick up that 3 acres, so that you'd at least pick up a little bit more land.
usually if there's land adjacent to any town facilities nowadays,
You're
it
trying
just,
to, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, so that's certainly a goal,
Certainly.
Matt,
so that is,
Matt was trying to attract one of these big composting facilities.
I don't think we're at that point
Mhm.
for anything at the facility at this point.
And I think you probably have a lot of issues about odor control and so on, but
Yeah.
yeah, we're not doing that.
Certainly, land is
Collect the land
uh,
first.
premium
Collect
for
it,
them.
yeah.
Yeah, and especially being able to expand the existing facility, really they're landlocked to the parcel to the south or build another facility on adjacent land. Park and Rec Department has been relocated out of Wapping School this past year to the old Orchard Hill due to needs for the school system to occupy that as a high school annex. So right now they are in temporary space, and the Public Building Commission is really gonna be kind of the leader in determining what's the best next step for finding a permanent home, whether that's, a build new or renovation project. But they are certainly a department that is, in a temporary space right now, and so that's why they are in red. Outdoor and indoor parks and rec facilities, I kind of have between a green and a yellow, in that there's not any critical needs that, are so pressing that they need to be addressed, but there's certainly a long list of nice to haves. Most towns have some real challenges around being able to schedule, the growing sports leagues. And they noted that soccer fields in particular are in high demand, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can expand your capacity for outdoor fields, whether that's through lights, I know that's been discussed on many times over the years, or providing turfing that can sometimes allow for more intense use in the grass fields, or building a new field elsewhere. So those are kind of your three options. And then there's also continuing evolving of programs. We thought it was interesting, with your growing South Asian population, you now have cricket pitches at the fairgrounds, and I believe at Nevers, although I'm not sure if that's built yet. Parks and Rec indoor space is really at a premium. Your schools being your main gymnasiums. And talking with Michelle, we know that when Pleasant Valley was recently completed, the town opted to have a larger gymnasium to support Parks and Rec programs after hours. And so making sure there's that strong partnership between Parks and Rec and the Board of Ed will continue to be a priority. And then as part of the larger recreation center planning, a subdividable gym was listed as a priority when we had our interview with the Parks and Rec director. So that'll be all part of that Public Building Commission process, kind of going through the desired space program for that facility. And these investments are largely governed by the Park and Recreation Commission's master plan, or the park plan, that was last updated in 2020. I believe they're going to be doing another update relatively soon, so that guides their prioritization of capital investments. Senior Center and Teen Center are both in the yellow categories. These are both part of the community center building. And they're yellow largely because they're well-used spaces, and there is somewhat of a competition between the seniors and the teens for use of spaces. And the Senior Center in particular has a growing demand for programs. There's been a shift to more active senior programs. You know, if we go back 20 years, a lot of the senior programs were much more social services oriented and geared towards older seniors. Now they're seeing a lot more demand for younger seniors who want to do recreation programs, and their space needs are different than when the facility was designed back in 1990. And there is some room on site to support an addition to that building. I believe they may have even done some conceptual design for an addition when they built it. The Teen Center shares space with with the Senior Center. You know, we talked with them about would it make sense for them to maybe relocate to a recreation center. And for them, one of the biggest assets of the current facility is the location right across the street from the high school. So they can have students walk over and get services without having, you know, a parent have to drop them off. So to them, that was a key consideration. They have a growing need for youth counseling, which needs some smaller, you know, private spaces for one-on-one services. Again, a space that maybe wasn't part of the design 30 years ago, and again, potentially a space that could be added as part of a addition. So this is yellow, something that the town should really start to engage in that planning, conceptual design, cost estimating. Those are really the first steps before you place it on the CIP, kind of do that next level of due diligence. Yeah.
What's in the old Orchard Hill now?
The recreation department.
Parks and Rec.
So they're not in the Wapping Annex at all, there's no
They're
offices?
Out of Wapping.
That's the high
100%,
school now.
okay.
That's Taylor High School.
I believe the facilities department was also in,
Yeah, so
Wapping.
they
Wapping.
moved as well.
yes, so they're
So
another,
they're at Orchard Hill also?
yes, they're another kind of staffing group that's without a permanent home. So those are the two most impacted by that.
Why do we say that's not a permanent home when the town owns the building now and it's, what else are you gonna do with it? Can't it just be their permanent home?
Yeah, I think the idea, and I think that might be one of the options that they look at, but
There would have to be improvements made, so an educational building is different than a town building. So there can be some code things that will have to be addressed. We're allowed to be in there temporarily, and it may become the permanent home, but I think there's still some building modifications that would have to occur if it were to be made a permanent location.
Well, plus there's desire for,
And then whether or not you do anything larger or whatever.
there's also desire for an aquatic center, which probably room there for one, right?
yep, I think that's gonna be a community conversation where it's gonna be you know, how much of a priority is it? Can you afford it? And, you know, where does that stack up relative to some of the other capital needs? So I think this plan will recognize that, you know, it was noted in the community survey as an asset that some residents want, but certainly that's gonna, I think the cost is gonna be a driver of that going forward, so.
Can we talk about that for a moment?
Sure.
So in your survey, and in the previous survey, I don't know when it was done, but it was a number of years ago, that was like the greatest desire on the part of the residents is an indoor pool. Like shot off the charts. It's almost like if one of the people running for the November election promised the town that they could get one, they would get elected. What is happening with the LA Fitness building? Because they have a pool.
It's turning into Club Studio, which will
Yeah.
it's another LA Fitness entity, if you will. There's a sign out in front that says, right now you can go out on the website, I believe it's another couple, maybe 2 months before it'll be open.
Right.
But it is going to be opening back up very soon.
As a fitness facility.
Correct.
Mhm.
They're doing rehab on the inside. I understand it'll be more geared towards classes like Pilates and maybe yoga and those kinds of things, plus the pool, you know, all the things, all the other elements are remaining, so.
All right then.
I know when the town looked at it, or when the committee that was looking for a permanent home looked at it, it's not like competitive size. It's small, it would have to be redone anyway, but it was a consideration.
It's a pool.
Yeah, I'm with you, Paul. It was a pool.
Plus, I think an aquatic center needs to have a lot more kid fun stuff in it. Can't just be a swimming pool.
Right.
You don't get that much use if you just build a swimming pool.
Yep, and certainly there's gonna be a lot of competing demographic groups. I live in a community that has an indoor pool, and, you know, you have seniors that use the pool a lot during the day. You have kids, obviously, that have a certain section, but that's certainly gonna be part of the conversation too, is, you know, having space for everyone and how you schedule it. Obviously, high school competition as well, so you had a lot of competing entities that would need space.
I had the good fortune to go to the aquatic center in Jackson, and that thing has got, in addition to several pools and also different depth pools, kind of like our outdoor pool, it also had slides and fountains and you know, and the kids were just playing like crazy with the water there.
Right, so the library is another one where we have follow-up that's needed. We have a new library director, so I was in touch with him this week, hoping to schedule a time to sit down and kind of go over their long-term capital needs. We just have a placeholder in here for now. A little bit newer of a building than Town Hall with a renovation and addition in 1996. You do have some maintenance items in your CIP, as well as some ADA compliance upgrades that were noted in the town's ADA plan. And so I'll talk to the director to see if there's any, you know, space needs or any major initiatives that he plans on undertaking over the next decade. And then Wapping Community House, so I didn't know existed until doing this element. So the building right on the corner in Town Center, which I guess serves largely as an employee gym, Michelle?
Yes.
And also has some small office space leased to the Chamber of Commerce. And that largely is a, you know, kind of maintain as is. It's gonna need, you know, a roof after a certain period of time, et cetera. And those are all addressed as part of the town CIP. So the schools is an interesting one in that you have 4, you know, brand new elementary schools with Pleasant Valley just opening this year. Obviously, growing enrollment has been a challenge that the district has been grappling with over the last 7 or 8 years or so. And all 4 of your elementary schools are operating near capacity. The district has added some portable classrooms to PRS and has kind of played this musical chairs act shifting programs. Pre-K, I think, was originally in Orchard Hill and then got moved to the middle school and is now in Pleasant Valley in a space that it was designed to accommodate it. And so there's going to continue to be this monitoring and planning to meet enrollment needs. And, you know, talking with the folks over at the school district, I think their approach is having some of these more smaller targeted investments like portable classrooms to kind of get through this period of growth as opposed to, you know, a large major building project. However, they are also starting to see enrollment grow in the middle and high school. Enrollment growth's largely been in the elementary school system, but some of those larger classes are starting to move into the middle and high school. The pre-K is moved out of the middle school now, so the middle school has some space to grow into, which is really good. They've also done some interior alterations to expand the cafeteria and carve out some additional spaces within the existing building. And then as we discussed earlier, the school system has reclaimed Wapping School, now using that as a high school annex where they house some of their special programs, and that's displaced their Parks and Recs facilities.
How effective is that? I mean, the kids have got to walk across a considerable distance to go to a class over there.
I did it in high school,
I
and
know.
it was an annex back then, so it's perfectly fine.
I believe they also have an
They're big
alternative
people.
education, kind of a self-contained program that was using classroom space in the main building where they are in the annex as well. So they may not be kind of shifting in between the main building and the annex. And so the schools is, you know, the facility conditions in the green, but it's the adequacy to serve the students that's kind of yellow to red. And it's a thing to continue to monitor and maintain that, strong relationship with the school district and the town in terms of planning for any investments that may be needed. And just for the record and for everyone's knowledge, SLAM is doing the enrollment projection update for the school system this fall. We'll share that with Michelle, and she'll share it with you all once that's complete, and that'll give us a sense of, how close are we to reaching the top of the enrollment growth peak.
Think
Did you
we're
do
there.
your current projection?
Yes.
So does it show a downturn after 2030, 31, or is it still?
It stays elevated, but it stops the exponential growth.
Right, so it's flattening out. Okay.
Yes.
Because I think what we got going on here is the baby boom echo, right? For that, those people now have kids in the school system. So there's a wave system goes through the school system, and hopefully, based on the enrollment projections, that peak hopefully will pass 2030 and 2031.
One of the things that
Don't think so?
No,
No.
no.
Because
No.
those baby boomers are gonna start moving out of their houses if they haven't already.
But there's fewer baby boom echoers, or after that generation, right? So it's the waves.
If you're talking about the country's population, it's a little different than what seems to be driving our school enrollment, which is people moving into houses because they wanna come to the school system. So, the 4-bedroom house with 2 people in it becomes a 4-bedroom house with 4 people in it.
And the number, even in the apartments, when they say we're gonna get 7 students, we end up with 42. People come here for education, so when you guys think you're having, this is what happened to us 10 years ago, was everybody said, we're done, we're in good shape, and we just kept going. And it didn't stop, and now we are where we are, we're in trouble.
I'll pipe down, I'll let Pat
And South
do his
Windsor's-
magic.
South Windsor is unique. We work in a lot of school districts doing our demographic work, and you are I believe, the fastest growing K-12 district. And there are a lot of other communities that have seen similar levels of housing and population growth that have not seen their enrollment increase anywhere near the extent that South Windsor has. So it's certainly, there's kind of a local phenomenon here that's at play. Where I live in West Hartford, the town added several hundred housing units in the 2010 to 2020 period, and school enrollments continued to go down. And so it's certainly a hyper-local trend here. And as part of our work with the school system, we always do an update every year of how many students are coming out of the different housing developments. So we'll certainly provide that with you. That may, I think, be useful as you get other applications of, here's how many kids are coming out of Tempo Phase 1, how many per unit, how many are coming out of South Windsor Woods. So if you get a similar application, you'll have some good information at your fingertips that reflects South Windsor, because, someone who's, working for the applicant is probably gonna use, statewide data, which, they don't have access to the hyper-local data that we have at our fingertips.
Michelle, is that what happened with, when we had SLR on the last one? Like, that was at the point when we just opened up the new Orchard Hill, and we were at that, they pretty much said we were peaked and starting to go down, and that never happened, and we just kept.
You're talking about 10 years ago? Is that
Yeah.
what you're talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking about
I
the
know
last
that- I know
POCD,
that
we had
the-
SLR that did the numbers, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No,
Planometrics did the plan in 2014.
but it was
But I
different
don't remember who
demographics.
did the school enrollment,
Yeah,
the
it
school
would've been-
enrollment that we relied on,
yeah.
it wasn't.
It was somebody different than you guys
That
were
wasn't
doing.
us. That
Yeah,
was
it
my
was
old
before you
company,
guys.
so.
Yeah, I don't
It
recall.
was
I
Mullen
have to
McGraw,
look.
which is now SLR.
Okay.
I do think it would be important though to have all of the assumptions that are going into the data. Because I think that South Windsor is unique. There are some features about South Windsor. I mean, one of them is our relationship to Hartford itself and the population of like H1 visas that are living in South Windsor. There's just some things that I think we have to take into consideration and make sure that we have them documented in our assumptions. Because like West Hartford, I would think, because of the level of private schools, Catholic schools in West Hartford, you probably have a higher percentage of your population going to alternative schools. So all of those things come into play, and we really want a very solid, like, hang our hats on it. And in order to do that, we need to look at those assumptions and then challenge them a little bit and make sure that we've captured all of the things that we think are gonna happen here.
And it's certainly one of the things that we rely on is kind of our experience working with lots of other similar districts. Rocky Hill was another community in Greater Hartford that saw kind of the sudden growth. They were kind of a couple years ahead of you, and fortunately, I don't think that growth there has continued in kind of that forever, exponential, every year on top of every year, it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Your classes here are still large. Your kindergarten classes that are entering are much larger than they were 10 years ago. So gradually, if you have 6 big kindergarten classes entering and your kindergarten classes don't keep getting bigger year over year over year, which the last few years I don't believe they've gotten tremendously larger, eventually you're going to reach the point where all grades are just big. They're not growing, they're big. And it's about kind of looking at the space, the classroom space, and making sure you have enough. So we can certainly go through all that in detail once we have our updated report in the fall.
When you spoke to the Board of Ed regarding that, as the elementary school children are now hitting middle school, those larger classes, is it the high school first or the middle school where their concerns are?
Middle school is going to be the next. They're already starting to see it, and then the high school will follow, 3 to 4 years after. So you have longer time to plan for the high school.
But we have, I think you're saying that we've picked up some room after the pre-K left. I'm just talking about which one
It's
is
minimal.
which one is bursting at the seam.
Yeah, so I don't do capacity
Okay.
of the buildings. That would be something for the district. They could probably tell you, which of those 2 buildings may need a project next, and kind of the extent of it. I know that's kind of an ongoing thing with them, obviously with taking over Wapping and kind of fitting out the middle school space. They're certainly well aware of it, and continuing to do what they can.
When you do the look at population, the other thing I would look at is the turnover in our temporary spaces, like how much turnover, because where you have people buying homes, right? I agree with you that you'll see those kids go like this but where you have rentals, you may have a different phenomena on that. And again, just because I work and have done a lot of work with H-1 visas, you have not everybody gets renewed, not everybody gets a green card, not everybody gets to stay. And so depending on what's happening in that space, especially in rentals, if you're seeing turnover there, then you're not going to see that growth in the same way. What you could see is a continued growth in those elementary schools.
Yeah, and what we've done over the last several years is we track your older condominium complexes, the ones built in the 60s through 90s. Those have certainly contributed to a lot of the growth you've seen, so we're certainly well aware of the local phenomena. So I could spend
Can you go
hours
back
talking.
to, because you didn't talk about the offices.
Sure.
I had a question, when they were originally planning the 10-year plan for the schools and the Orchard Hill School, the building commission held meetings on the upper floor, and then there were complaints that it wasn't ADA accessible. So is the whole building accessible now, or what's the status of that feature?
Sure. And I don't believe that was part of the ADA
I
study either.
don't believe there's
They haven't
Oh,
made any
no.
changes to that.
no. Only the main floor would be when you go in.
Talking about Ellsworth.
I believe that's the
Yeah.
only accessible.
So I think that's a problem. I mean, you got an office in town where not everybody can go to every
I
office.
don't know if they have an elevator in there that they've added.
I'm not
part of the
familiar with
project,
an
so.
elevator there. They did it with Memorial, they
Yeah,
did, but
we could follow up and ask.
Yeah,
So.
okay.
I've never been able to take one there.
I see that there's a lot of maintenance and capital improvements being done there. I've been in that building a lot, and does it have asbestos issues? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
It seems like it would.
Probably
Just
guaranteed,
haunted.
in all honesty.
And just leave it and.
on it?
No, they'll encapsulate it or something, but it depends what type of renovation they do. And, you know, they've got bigger fish to fry with the middle school and the high school and all that. You know, like right now, the gym in there, the roof is leaking. But it doesn't seem like it's a priority. I just hope it doesn't go into something like mold, because it's been leaking for a while.
So all the, when my kid was playing rec basketball, all the games were played there. Like, you know,
Best
from
gym floor
morning
in
till
town.
night, Saturdays and Sundays,
Yeah.
constantly being used. I would think that that facility needs extra attention, but that's just me.
All right, so looking at potential strategies, certainly one that you're planning for right now is finding that permanent home for the Parks and Rec Department, and then whatever path you choose, whether that's new, renovation, a combination of the two, make those necessary improvements. The park plan is really your guiding document for parks capital improvements, so we certainly see the town continuing to use that as their guide. Expanding and continuing partnerships between Parks and Rec and the school system, since the school system does own many of your athletic facilities. As we kind of went through in the previous slides, we see kind of the four facilities that you should start kind of taking those next planning steps would be the police station, public works, town hall, and community center. So looking at some initial planning, site due diligence, conceptual design, cost estimates, and there's going to be maybe priorities within these four of, okay, do you just focus on one for now? But these are all four facilities that could be on that list. It came up a couple times during our conversation, having land available to support your facilities is crucial, and having either rates of first refusal or jumping on properties as they become available is a sound effort to making sure that you have the land to support those facilities. We did talk to your facilities department, and we think there could be some opportunities to strengthen shared services. Right now, there is some shared services between the town and the school system and the fire department, but there certainly is opportunities to strengthen that, especially for example, the school system has a lot of state-of-the-art, building control systems that were installed as part of that. So you have folks that work for the school system facilities department who are very knowledgeable about some of these more advanced systems. If the town were to do, something like that as part of a comprehensive renovation of this building or a recreation center, could they leverage that school expert as opposed to hiring a town staff person? So that's certainly a conversation that we think could be beneficial. Staffing, we talked a little bit about the fire department, but just globally in Connecticut, a lot of municipalities are facing an aging workforce and challenges recruiting. I know, speaking for myself, I can't recall a time where I've seen so many municipal planner openings on the Connecticut Planning Listserv as I have over the last 12 months or so. And so obviously facilities are important, but you have to have staff to meet those needs that your residents.
We're not gonna let Michelle leave.
You're gonna be around.
Toss me the handcuffs.
You're gonna be around for the next plan, right?
Yeah, I can guarantee you that. Oh, yeah, that I can guarantee.
How is the remote
Wait,
work,
fourth and last one.
Do it if you do it.
Sorry.
how's the remote work phenomenon affecting municipalities? I mean, we're very different in our public space.
We're not, we don't allow it.
And I think, I saw Vernon's looking at a 4-day work week as kind of a way of countering that. There's just, worked briefly as a town planner myself, and that's certainly it's part of the job. You have to do desk duty and interact with folks, and so it's certainly challenging for many municipal positions to move to a fully remote, and obviously competition with other entities who may be able to offer that's a challenge. And so I think municipalities will have to look at kind of the whole package of what they offer, to try to stay competitive. I know, the 4-day work week example in Vernon, I think, is largely trying to achieve kind of more stable staffing and a recruitment tool. ADA upgrades, you have an ADA assessment that guides those improvements. Some of those can be done as part of your larger, projects, but some are just gonna be done as part of your CIP. The school system we talked about, and then guiding the location of community facilities, which was within your last plan. Kind of maintaining the town center as a civic hub, which really is an asset. It draws a lot of people here, and so making sure that those facilities are located in those areas that can have the best secondary benefits.
Can I ask a question before we leave facilities? Michelle, you might be the best person to speak to this. So, this building, the town hall building, we had a referendum like 3 or 4 years ago to move to, what was the vacant bank building? And one of the compelling reasons was storage issues. And I was hearing horror stories at the time about the lack of storage facility and the condition that some really important documents are in because of that lack of space. What's the reality of that? I know that your office is really cramped.
Well, I think the biggest issue I would see as far as getting meeting room space is one of the biggest issues in town hall, because when you put probate in down here, they can pretty much take a room up every day.
Right.
So, from a staff perspective, trying to find a meeting room to accommodate a group like this or something like that, it can be challenging. The space issue, so much has gone into the electronic world that kind of stuff is kind of not as big of an issue as maybe it was 5 years ago even. My issue gets more into what we do with our electronic data and how we move forward, making sure it's all available and that kind of stuff. I think those are some challenges we have. As far as people go, you can see the renovations that were done in town hall.
Right.
Your tax office and your assessor's office, they're pretty open. You can see there's, until you start adding more people to some of these offices, that's when you're really gonna start running into, the town manager's office is pretty tapped out as far as room goes for employees there. Are we cramped? Not necessarily cramped, but sure, you can always use more space. I think some of it's organization, though. We need to be a little bit more organized with some of our space.
So a lot of the documents have been converted to digital files?
Yeah, for example, all of our building files right now are out of the office being converted as we speak. And so we're doing that. Again, I think we need to really put resources in how we manage that electronic data. That's my biggest concern moving forward, because I spent lots of years here making sure all the planning and zoning files were readily accessible. And with conversions of data, that's not true so much as it was before, because we get to, everybody says, oh, no problem, it's a new program. Well, it doesn't always convert over easily, so those are the things I think we have the biggest challenges with. Because everybody wants to do it electronically now, nobody wants paper anymore, except for me. I'm the dinosaur.
Infrastructure-wise, as
Don't
far as
laugh.
the building, we're good though, right? Like the electronics and the,
Oh, sure, we're always, as you know, we're constantly getting the latest things that we need to do the job. I mean, we definitely are,
You also have, the security issues, backup, hackers coming in and.
oh, yeah, IT, I'm sure, has a world of stuff. But when you look at this building too, our office upstairs is now the only office that you can get into without being let in, right? You have to get fobbed into any other office. Town clerk's office, you can walk into the back room where all the records are, but you can't go into their offices. So there is a plan to take the third floor and turn it into something that would be a much more secured kind of floor. We ran out of money to do that with the ARPA monies. And personally, it will take away the counter kind of activity that we currently have, so I'm not really a fan of that idea myself.
we kinda need that
So
interaction.
if it doesn't ever happen, I'll be okay with it. But there is thoughts of how you could do business differently on that floor and have more of a public space. But again, a lot of it depends on people going to computers and getting access to data through computers, and we are not there.
The portal stuff, like even with building, with a building permit, is just, it's taxing for.
Yeah, and so you can do it to your address. So if you wanna come in and look at the permits on his address, it's a matter of staff having to get those to give to you, so it's not seamless yet or anything like that, so. there's some-
I'm gonna wrangle us back in.
Yeah,
as we
you
go.
need to.
We're at 45 minutes, so we'll speed us up here.
Too many issues on the. That's fine. Too many
All right, so next we'll talk about utilities, and really, this is just from the 2014 plan. A lot of these goals overarching are still relevant today. Meeting with the WPCF or WPCA staff, your water pollution control facility has some room to accommodate future growth. So right now, at about 2/3 of the design flow. And there's no capacity issues with the small parts of town that get sent to, I believe, MDC or Manchester. One issue that was noted is the Clark Street Pump Station, which serves most of your commercial districts, so the Evergreen Walk area, Buckland Road, part of town center. That's currently operating at close to capacity, and I believe they wanted to undertake a study of that sewer shed to better understand if it has any capacity concerns going forward, not just the pump station, but the downstream sewer pipes, making sure the diameter is wide enough to accommodate, a full build out of that Buckland Road corridor. And what a lot of WPCAs have seen in the last couple of years is inflow and infiltration are starting to become bigger issues, especially as we have those very intense rainstorms where you're having a lot of stormwater infiltrate into the sewer pipes, and that's creating, situations where you're approaching your maximum design flow and/or having to do sewer overflows. I'm not aware of.
This recent rain period, we were running triple the amount of water going through than what we usually see.
Yes, certainly there's a lot of I&I in your system. Again, something that I think they wanted to study so that they can target, their capital improvements to addressing that, because every gallon of stormwater that gets into the system is a gallon that can't support a development in town. So certainly a big issue.
Just on the Clark Street pump station, how does that affect any future growth in like the Gateway Zone and the town center north and center?
Yeah, so it has some capacity. They did provide us with kind of the capacity and flows of each of the pump stations. And so I think for them they need to do a study to figure out more of a full build out. It didn't sound like there was anything so pressing that it would stop anything in the near term. But certainly in terms of long-term planning, you'll want to make sure that has enough capacity. It may be okay, it may need an expansion. That sewer study that the WPCA wanted to undertake, it will help answer that question.
And this inflow and infiltration is a big part of the Clark Street pump station. We are actually running a study in this year's budget to figure out where that water's coming from, track it down and fix it.
And certainly that could help open up and prevent a costly, upgrading capacity of the pump station if that could be addressed.
So the sewer waste or the water that's going through the pipes, how old are these pipes that?
Some of them in the 60s.
Well, they've been relining them. The ones that were in danger have been.
All of them?
They've been, the ones that were, it's a process. It's
Yeah.
kind of like capital improvements. It's a
It's a
system.
pretty cool process. You put a liner in there, you do some kind of a treatment to solidify it in place, and you got a new pipe.
Right, it's done from the inside. So. But the capacity of, the flow rates and capacities as the discharge from the pump as it's coming in, it's gotta go out as fast as it's being, in the past, if we're operating at 60% capacity, that means you have 60% capacity in your pipe. When you start running 100% and getting close to that, your pipes are full and it's all heading down to you,
Well,
Main Street.
I've heard complaints of, like the pumps getting clogged with baby wipes, that
Oh,
type
yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
And when those, I don't know how many pumps there are, but when a pump goes down,
They have multiple pumps in each pump station.
There's a backup, there's a generator system, there's backup to the backup. Oh, no, there's a backup in each station, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just have 3 plans of future upgrades at the Benedict, the Pleasant Valley and Clark Street that just came through you guys that
Yeah,
are
and that's-
deep, I know, that, are all along the lines of trying to provide some more of these things at these.
I'd just like to see, what,
We're there.
for future growth. I
Sure.
mean, when we're talking
Absolutely.
a 10-year plan,
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important, the Clark Street one in particular is the one that
Yep.
is probably the most concerned from a development perspective.
Yeah, and I think also, in addition to that, I think once it leaves Clark Street, it goes down Pleasant Valley Road, so I think that was kind of a twin issue of you can expand the capacity of the Clark Street pump station, but if the pipe downstream is too small, you're gonna have to do that project concurrently, so.
And the Benedict pump station has failed twice in recent memory and literally put sewage in a house's basement. So there's some real issues here.
Well, that's, again, that's part of our planning, like, with the new apartments at Evergreen, it's growth and now our infrastructure's being taxed and it's just an evil cycle.
school system, infrastructure. Okay, thank you.
So getting into the sewer service map, this is the map that was shared with me by your WPCA. And so to go over, the changes, you haven't had any changes in your map other than, you've had some new connections and filled in certain parcels. You have had 2 extensions within areas that were always planned for sewers, so a 1,000-foot extension on Miller Road, which I believe is just serving existing residential homes, and then an extension on Ellington Road, which serves some of the distribution centers that have been built there. And then obviously as new subdivisions get built within the sewer service area, they connect as well. One of the most interesting things, looking at this map, as a planner who's done this in a lot of other communities, is I've never seen a parcel-based sewer service map before that goes by parcel and says, this one's yes, a future connection, this one's no. And I think there's some challenges with this map where you have many instances where you'll have a sewer line, a property will be fronting the sewer line, yet it'll be a conservation area, which I assume is the same as a sewer avoidance area. And, for example, obviously at the town park, it's not gonna be a major development, but many of your town parks or open spaces are green, even if there's a sewer line in front of them. So if you ever wanted to build restrooms or another facility that needed to tap in, there could be some conflicts there. And then the other challenge that I see is, especially looking at the Main Street area where we have, long lots, some of them extend probably close to a half a mile. We have some of these that are called sewer service area that extend kind of the whole depth of the parcel, and other ones that are not. And I think that just creates confusion in terms of, does the town envision sewers in this area if there's development or not? And I put together this kind of alternative approach that is conceptual. Obviously, this is just for a conversation starter for tonight. And actually, one last thing on this map I want to point out too is that you have a lot of sewer lines serving your lowest density residential zones, which again was interesting. Most communities I work in, this map much more closely aligns to your zoning map, where your zones that are, an acre or more, they're all gonna be your sewer avoidance. Your lots that are, half acre to an acre will generally be in your sewer area. And so that's kind of what this is taking that alternative approach and say, okay, if I take all of the zones in South Windsor that I'll say have the density to support sewer service, they're highlighted in green. So that's all of your commercial zones, and that's all of your multifamily residential, so your design residence, your multifamily zones, and any single family zones with a minimum lot size of less than 40,000 square feet. Those are all highlighted in this kind of neon yellow. And as you can see, you have sewer in just about all those areas, which makes sense. I think where some of the The challenges we see are in our lower density zones, which are your residential zones with a minimum lot size of greater than 40,000 square feet. So that's your rural residential and your R40 zone. And many of these areas are sewered. And I know we've talked about some of the conservation priorities, and it's somewhat of a situation where I think the development and conservation policies right now are kind of at odds with each other. So, for example, we have farmland we want to preserve in the Main Street corridor. Our existing sewer map shows some of those farm fields as blue in your sewer service area. Is that really?
Flood zone, and it's blue, yeah.
Yeah, so even some of these interior lots between Main Street and Route 5 that aren't in the flood zone, some of these are old sewer service. Is that really in alignment with your vision as a land use board? Granted, I know WPCA obviously has to ultimately be on board. And so the areas where the zoning and your existing sewer infrastructure are at odds with each other, I've highlighted in yellow. And so I'm calling that our sewer exception area. So this is basically our lower intensity zones where you have existing sewer, and it's good for, properties along the sewer line to connect, but is this really an area where you would want a new subdivision to tie into the sewer system, or do we want to limit it to a buffer? Which seems to align better with some of those conservation conversations that we've had. So this is just kind of, I guess, opening this up of, is this an approach that should be discussed further with WPCA that would really bring your zoning and your sewer plan and policies into better alignment? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very weird situation behind Peterson here. Michelle knows all about it. It's surrounded by sewers. They want to do some development there. It's not a sewer area. So, without a change from WPCA and some agreement with DEEP, I think, they have to build septic in there where they could easily run a sewer line out to Oakland or something like that.
And I think too,
And it's a little bit, it's kind of strange that is sitting there
And
like
in that situation, your zoning and your wetlands regulations are gonna really dictate how it can get land developed, you know what I mean? From a
Well,
density perspective.
But as, knowing that it would almost help us with a decision to say, right, we're at capacity, you wanna develop this? It's gonna have to be an engineered system, and
Yeah, I'll just give my 2 cents on it. There's a long history how we got parcel based, and it kind of happened when we got GIS, and we could highlight a piece of property, and it highlights the whole thing. So that's kind of what happens to your parcel based map when you're picking pieces of property. And there's a long history why we got to that map, and I don't want to go into it, but from a moving forward perspective, a map like this to me is so much more useful because it is your zoning policies. This is where you want to see your land, your densities to happen, and I know that the state wants us to recognize conservation areas as conservation. I mean, they really are looking for us not to extend sewers everywhere. They want us to be, cognizant that we're putting in our areas where it's denser and leaving our rural areas open. So I think this helps us get to that, from a policy perspective. And it kind of blurs the parcel lines, which is really, we shouldn't be parcel based. It really should be based on a bigger thing than an individual parcel.
and I think a kind of a dovetailed issue that you brought up, Michelle, is we have instances where we have streets with sanitary sewer and water service that are zoned rural residential. So I think it also could be a challenge to the commission for you to review your zoning policies for areas that have capacity to support higher density. So, for example, we have some lots around the periphery of the town center that are served by sewer and water, yet are in your rural residential zone. They weren't in your overlay, and this might not be an immediate need, but it could be. Could that be an area where you'd look into allowing some more intense development just because you have the infrastructure there that can support it? So I think there's a second part of that as well, of if the infrastructure's there,
Having the infrastructure there, but having the capacity to be able to facilitate is what I have a problem with. Knowing, we have the pipes, we have the pump stations, but if they're already maxed out, then we should be almost, I don't know the word to use, but we should not be encouraging to say, oh, it's rural residential, but I think we can densely populate this when all we're gonna do is compile our problem. So I think
But I think, and like any zone change, that's where you look at your impact on utilities, so as you're moving forward, maybe you're in a different situation and
Yep.
your sewer situation is better, and so that's the whole purpose of the zone change and why it's not just a given, you gotta look at your impact on your schools, your infrastructures, your
and I think the
networks.
a benefit of going to a zoning based is as your zoning changes, it makes it pretty easy to just pass it off to the WPCA and say, yep, we've modified this zone, we now think it's in the sewer density or it's not, and it makes it a little smoother, I think, from a flexibility standpoint.
So would that give, let's say we decided to make, everything south of 291 and 840 zone or whatever, and we do that, and this is just an example, okay? We do that, do we just tell WPCA that now you got a sewer zone, or, do we write a policy that says, I'm in 820, okay? Do we tell them that we just made that a sewer thing, or is that still up to them to say, well, you changed the zone, now we gotta change our sewer map?
I think WPCA ultimately is responsible for the map. I think if there's an understanding between your two entities that zoning is subject to change and periodically the map will be evaluated in light of zoning, obviously they have to make their decision. But I think it also, this document and your commission can't dictate WPCA to, you can't compel them to adopt the map, but if you can establish even procedures as part of it, of zones with a density of, or with a minimum lot size of 1 acre or less will be considered sewer avoidance unless necessary for public health. That's usually a good kind of asterisk because sometimes there are exceptions you need to make. That could make that process easier until the map gets modified, having kind of a text policy.
Or you could ask WPCA to approve any zone change that changes the sewer status or something.
Certainly ones that would add density that would need to be sewered that isn't currently accounted for. Certainly they would have to have a voice in the zone change process.
Yeah, and as part of the zone change process, from a staff perspective, we do reach out to Tony, for example, from WPCA. So, assuming that kind of global look goes forward, the planning and zoning should know what the sewer opinion is, whether sewers could be extended, or what the potential is if you're going into an area that's not sewered, for example.
I
We
can
don't
tell
have too many
you,
more areas of sewering that I can come up with, but.
I can tell you that this strikes me as a really good idea, but we probably need to plan on a good, long, special meeting with WPCA to
So
make
that'll be,
this kind of a radical change.
so that'll be one of my pitches at the end when we talk about a special focus area. This to us, I think, is one of the potential topics. We'll put that in the parking lot for now.
Let me just
Yeah, go
add
ahead.
a couple of things. So the state changed the statutes, I think it was 2017, and said as part of a POCD, that POCD has to identify, as Pat said, these areas, and talk about sewer avoidance areas. So the state is anticipating there's gonna be a map in the plan that's gonna sort of lay this out, and as Pat says, having a dialogue about this is probably an area we may wanna devote some resources. Also just wanted to pass on, for example, the town of Simsbury, since the late 1960s, has had a sewer limit line on their map. And they sized their system, their pump stations and everything else based on the development potential inside that line. And the issue is, you're on the line outside and you wanna connect, and you've got to go through the functional equivalent of sort of a zone change. And the pump stations weren't sized and other stuff to sort of address this situation. So becomes kind of a case, I think it's simply managing your capacity based on the zoning, et cetera. They reinforce each other. And it almost seems here that the capacity wasn't issued on a first come, first served basis, but if the sewer was there, oh, okay. And in fact, if we end up giving away capacity we might want for economic growth or economic development or other priorities of the town, we might wanna have sort of a different kind of program in place. So there's some options that we can share, and I think that dialogue is a step in the right direction.
There's almost two separate issues. Where's this map? And then what do we need to do? I mean, right now, if somebody comes in with a development, they come to WPCA and okay. But the whole idea of the global capacity rather than this little spot where we're doing development, maybe needs to be more carefully planned out.
Certainly. All right.
I will really get you to say what, I don't wanna do that.
So just to recap, obviously, one of our recommendations is to better align those different land use policies, infrastructure policies. Some of the projects that are in the pipeline, the sewer evaluation study focused on Clark Street. So that'll be looking at things like I&I, as Steve mentioned. And then the 3 pump station projects currently in your CIP. They're also doing upgrades to the water pollution control facility, so UV disinfection system and some odor control improvements. I&I is a global issue. Obviously, the Clark Street pump station is most pressing given the capacity. And yeah, really making sure that whatever improvements are done to Clark Street have that capacity to support your future build out of that area. So that's really the key. Water service is not maintained by the town. You have a split service area between MDC, which serves the southwestern portion of town, and Connecticut Water, which serves most of the remainder. Almost every area of South Windsor is as water service. It's more extensive than your sewer service area mapping, or than your sewer service area. You do have some developments that still rely on well water, and you know, working with the water department's health department, I think it is kind of continue to monitor those properties on wells, consider extensions of water lines if needed to address any public health issues. Water supply planning is really more of a regional task. You do have 2 well fields that are within South Windsor. So the Chunos well field, apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, and part of the Talcottville well field, the well's actually in Vernon, but part of the well field extends into Connecticut, or into South Windsor. And so continuing to do source protection for those areas will be important. But other water supplies are, I believe MDC is largely in Glastonbury, the reservoir is there. And also CT Water, I believe you're connected in with the Shinipsit Reservoir in Vernon as well. So partnering with your neighboring towns will be key. And
What exactly is a well field? I mean, I know what a well is, but what's a well field?
similar to like an aquifer protection area. So areas where groundwater is eventually making its way into the well. So here it doesn't rise to the level of an aquifer protection area, which has some special land use controls. But this is basically the area that drains into, may eventually make its way into the well.
So right now, there's nothing we wouldn't build there, or is there something we wouldn't build in that area?
No, what happens is when something gets proposed in that area, they have to notify the water, Connecticut Water about it. And then there's only one time in all the years I've been here that they had any comment ever. And it was really related to Mitchell Fuel, which is, you know, right along that area there, when they were proposing an addition many years ago that they never built. But they had some specific things, they just wanted them to be careful with the drainage. But beyond that, we don't really have much information about it.
Those issues are handled by the water companies and.
Yeah, directly with it. It was a public act that required an applicant to notify them, so we just kind of try to follow, make sure it gets done.
And so in terms of water service, this is largely, you know, your next 10 years largely focused on system maintenance, protecting water quality, and resiliency, largely drought planning. That seems to be a growing trend, more frequent. So having policies in place within all the member towns in your service area will be important. And the water company leads those efforts as the supplier. Drainage and stormwater, we covered as part of the sustainability element, so I don't want to go into too much detail just to keep us on schedule. But, you know, kind of the overall philosophy is getting away from that traditional collect and convey approach to more of a infiltrate on-site approach wherever possible, and continuing to advocate for those lower impact development approaches as part of future land use applications. Other utilities I'll touch on briefly. Electrical and gas service are both run by Eversource. Michelle and I both actually attended a session on climate resilience at our planning conference last week, or 2 weeks ago, and they showed a really interesting map that Eversource puts out. It's called the Distributed Generation Hosting Capacity Map. A lot of words, but essentially what it shows is transmission lines that have capacity to support additional generation. So if I were to put solar panels, let's say, on some buildings in Evergreen Walk, the transmission lines are coded green here, which means that they have, ample capacity to distribute that power to wherever it's needed. What you'll notice is that in the Route 5 corridor, most of your transmission lines are in the red or dark red, which means you have very limited capacity. So even if you were to put solar panels, let's say, on some of these distribution centers, there isn't a way to get that power from the distribution center to wherever it's needed because the transmission lines just don't have the capacity. So that could certainly be.
That seems odd.
It's a live map too, it's very wild, you can go into full statement.
So
On the other hand, don't they have a make-ready plan that's supposedly gonna fix some of these issues?
Yeah, so this is, I think, the town's role is really to advocate on, for improvements. So the Route 5 corridor, obviously, in addition to, you have opportunities for generation with some of those large roofs, but you also have a lot of manufacturers there that are probably pretty intense electrical users. So the town, really has to take that lobbying role when it comes to electrical improvements, knowing that at the end of the day, you have limited local control over it.
But as a provider, wouldn't it be their intent to upgrade or?
Or advantage, yeah.
I'm sure they have a capital planning process where they do that. But again, I'm not sure if, they may have a life, life cycle that they do for all of these. You install it, you let it go for 20, 30 years, you replace it when it needs it, kind of thing. So.
There are also other strategies that you can use, like the battery plus solar, so you don't need all of that electricity to go out onto the power line during the day. I guess the other map I'd like to see is, maybe it's the same map, where do we have the capacity to now only be making electric vehicles in this country, starting in 2030? Is there a similar map, or, that's a pretty neat map.
Yeah, usually the utilities they keep their data under lock and key pretty closely. I was actually pretty, I'm not surprised that they shared this map, because I think they're actively, there's a lot of folks interested in building solar with all of the government incentives, and so they put out this map of saying, if you want to do something and take advantage of these, federal rebate programs, these are the spots that are shovel ready. So a lot of the other information they keep under lock and key.
I wish I'd made it to this session, because I think I'm intrigued, a little bit maybe like Steve is, that the idea is that if they're pumping generation into the industrial area now because people are using it, there's no capacity. But it's also, could it be a situation that if they added solar, which reduced the demand, that it would actually free up capacity in the lines, and then we could now turn the traffic around and export it? I don't know.
It's a chicken or egg.
It is, but it's very much an interesting conversation that we've never really been part of before, because it's been kept under wrap and,
There actually, though, are two proposals related to that, and I don't know where they stand now. I think they may have kind of withered, but the idea was to build, huge batteries, put one behind the middle school and one at the sewer plant, and then manage the use of that battery, be paid to use that battery to supply power during the day, but to store power from the grid, not from solar, but from the grid at night. So it's a demand management based on just batteries, not solar. So that's another way they can address that problem.
I think there's a project proposed right now in Windsor,
Mhm.
going through the siting council for batteries, right over there.
What kind of batteries are we talking about, like,
The same battery that's in the electric car. You know?
no, but I mean,
Huge.
Think of batteries.
yeah,
They're huge. They're like,
Crazy if I told you.
they'd
today.
fill up half of this room. The one sewer plant.
But there's a limitation of how, I mean, you can't just store energy in them unlimited amount of time, right? It's not like a battery, battery. It's gotta come and go off.
like
Right,
lithium
but what
ions,
it is
you gotta
is-
draw it down.
The utility says, I need some of, okay, I got all kinds of excess capacity, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, so I'm gonna charge up your battery, and then I'm gonna pay you to supply me electricity during the daytime, like from 5 to 7. And so you make money, by having one of these batteries, you make money, the town would make money, and so would the company that built the battery, by you participating in this demand management, capability.
I'm gonna move us on, just because we got transportation to cover still. Really interesting conversation. Telecom, I'll just touch on really briefly, again, largely controlled by private providers and overseen by the siting council. The town does maintain some level of communications, so they're building out a fiber network serving all town buildings as part of their fiber plan. And then ongoing upgrades to the town emergency telecommunications, we touched on that, talking about the police station, and addressing some of the dead zones. So finally, getting onto transportation. So the 2014 plan, some of the overarching goals to minimize congestion, maintain roads, using complete streets where appropriate, focusing on road connectivity. I think there were some recommendations around the town center, especially working with regional transit providers, providing more options for walking and biking, and promoting the rail line for freight movement. So the roadway system, the town has a plan, an asset management plan called Paving for Progress that was developed in 2022, and that helps them prioritize projects from the road bond that passed in 2022, which has a significant chunk of that, $35.5 million for roadway projects, and then you have some set aside for sidewalks and drainage as well. You have had a complete streets policy adopted by the council. That's a good first step. And you know, I think the taking it the next step beyond is to kind of focus more on getting the actions out of the policy as part of your capital improvement plan and your conceptual design, making sure those elements are incorporated in it, perhaps having some more detailed engineering solutions that could be used for your different projects. This has come up multiple times throughout our process, is some of the challenges with being a community served by state roads. So many of those main arteries in town are overseen by the DOT. And sometimes the coordination between the town and the state is not great, and your policies don't align. I would hope that, you know, DOT has certainly evolved their thinking a little bit over the last few years, that there's going to be better dialogue between towns and the DOT when it comes on making those improvements to state roads, making sure they align with your land use goals.
Just for that 35.5 million, how long was that expected to last?
I believe it was a 5-year program where they would spend that over 5 years, but I'm not positive.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Okay.
And, you know, like a lot of towns, you know, materials costs have increased dramatically, and, you know, the budget for, that's in your traditional budget is, you know, you pay fewer and fewer miles of roadway each year with your kind of traditional set aside. And so a lot of towns are using bonds simply to play catch up on, you know, maintenance projects that they used to be able to do through the traditional budgeting process. So certainly not an issue where South Windsor's alone. Traffic, perception of traffic increased as an issue when we did the community survey across all areas, and truck traffic in particular being one of the issues that was highlighted in the survey as being really a main concern about business development, as well as concerns in their neighborhoods. So this map just shows your roadway hierarchy or functional classification. And really, you have different roadways that have different jobs. Our interstates and arterials, their main job is through movement of people and freight to, further away destinations. Then we have our collectors, whose job it is to get people from, local streets to those arterials and interstates. And then we have our local roads, where really the job is mainly to serve those adjacent land uses. And this is an important consideration for zoning policy, as well as kind of overall land use policy and engineering solutions that you do for your roads. So a local road is going to have a very different design than a collector or an arterial. Similarly, if you look at this map, you'll see, your business zones are largely served by arterial roadways, which makes sense. You want to separate that traffic from local traffic, residential traffic, wherever possible. So this is just kind of an update here. We're also highlighting in this orange buffer state roads. So you can see Route 5, Route 194, which is Sullivan Ave, Ellington Road, as well as Route 30, which is Ellington Road and Oakland Road. So these are all under the purview of DOT.
Okay, how can Avery Street not be a major collector or a minor arterial?
So this is DOT's map. Some towns will have their own classification that they use. Your DPW probably does.
Actually, I asked Jeff Doolin, they don't.
They don't.
use this map.
So that could certainly be a recommendation, is the town can develop its own hierarchy, and that can help inform design. I thought another interesting one that struck out to me is
Buckland.
Deming is a local road.
Buckland should be more than a minor. I mean, Buckland and Clark don't seem like they should be.
Yep, and Deming Street as well.
Part of Deming
I guess so.
is a state route.
Yeah.
In the bottom right corner.
Very end of
Yeah,
it.
and certainly the area between Oakland and Buckland, functions, I think, more than a local road.
Yeah.
Right now.
Unfortunately.
But again, that comes down to kind of your engineering solutions, right? Of maybe that's a candidate for traffic calming, to your point, or if Ayers Road is another one where, it's largely functioning as a local road now that's right next to the schools as well. Perhaps the town has that local classification it uses, and that guides investments in that road for prioritizing traffic calming. So that's certainly an approach you could take. So we got rid of, I forget what the word was in the last plan, if it was reduce congestion, as much as we use the word manage here. Because traffic is good if you're a retail business. And so I think it's about kind of balancing it. We certainly want to reduce congestion on local roads. We want to reduce truck impacts to surrounding residential neighborhoods. We want to look at traffic calming, complete streets improvements. We want to make sure that the heavy traffic volumes are using the roads that are designed to accommodate them. So our Buckland roads, our Sullivan Avenues, our Route 5s. An approach that some towns have taken to through truck prohibitions. A lot of towns don't go through the process and they just throw up signs that say, please don't use this street. And DOT makes them take down the signs. There is an official procedure that the state has established that has to be approved by OSTA, where you can establish a enforceable through truck prohibition. I know a lot of other towns that have larger industrial areas that have buffers with residential neighborhoods. Windsor, I think East Windsor have both done this. They have designated no through truck streets that have been approved by OSTA.
And from my understanding is we don't have a single street in South Windsor.
Correct.
That is,
We thought we did.
There may have been a sign, but
yeah,
We got the signs, yeah. The signs are cheap.
yep. But
and
the-
yet they're still up. It's
Yeah, what's with that?
bewildering to me.
Unenforceable.
and,
Why are they
But
up?
if we go
Yeah,
through the
right.
process, well, we can't now
Is that a
because
police department thing?
There's a town
we can't
council
change that now, correct?
Yeah, what-
ordinance.
No, well, that's not the only one.
I understand. I'm just talking about,
Well, let me just tell you what is going on with Governor's Highway, just to keep everybody up to date. The town is working on, to redo Governor's Highway, and they are designing a roundabout that we talked about. That will go out to the public for comment sometime, when it's ready, but it is under design. And then potentially, maybe there's a piece of that roadway that we can request to not be trucks, like that piece between Ellington and Belden or something. I don't know, but there is a design that is underway for that roundabout that we talked about on Governor's.
Are they gonna widen where those homes are, that first little
I
section?
don't know enough about what it'll look like, but there will be something, stay tuned.
No, make it narrow.
Yeah, that's what she was saying, that,
You maybe
those-
keep trucks out of them, maybe.
Right, but,
Yeah.
you know,
But
with
you
the
gotta go through
likelihood
the
of that not
process and-
happening,
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Gotta
that-
start with a solution first.
So yeah, to Michelle's, thanks for adding that. It's in addition to obviously the policy side, there's the engineering side too. There's, the ways that you design roads will impact who uses them as well. So the roundabouts, I remember, I think Glenn and I had a conversation about the roundabouts to nowhere in Windsor, and, Glenn informed me, well, they're largely there for traffic calming and to prevent truck traffic.
Glastonbury to downtown, if you even try, when a truck sees that, they're like, oh my God, like, on
I
the
saw
radio.
one, I saw one,
Huh?
I saw one go through.
Yeah, well,
All its left tires were all up on the,
believe me, they do it one time and then they go, we're not coming back here again, so.
So in addition to some of the things we talked about, taking your complete streets policy the next step further, and really coordinating, enhancing your relationship with DOT, because especially in the town center, that's really an area where we see a benefit for complete streets. And then roadway resiliency is largely around bridges and drainage, where again you have some studies that are informing your capital improvements, but that those may need updates.
So on complete streets, I was under the impression that our policy is actually significantly out of date with what's expected out of a complete street policy, but I don't know the specifics.
Wouldn't agree with that. I mean, I can get you, complete street policies are kind of lofty in nature, right? We talk about whenever you're doing anything with a roadway, you make sure you examine it for the walker, the biker, the car. So, and it has suggestions, so I mean, whether or not they're followed and people actually do what the complete street policy suggests, maybe where we run into the problems, but I mean, I'll provide you with the policy, they're pretty.
Well, I've got a copy.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure what's outdated about it. I guess I would have to have someone tell me.
Well, I
what's
think
outdated.
as planning and zoning commissioners, we've been forceful, like
We've been trying to get sidewalks. And things like that.
sidewalks. I mean, we've beaten that with a red horse and gotten ourselves in trouble over it,
And I know
so.
when engineering does any new roads, I mean, the public meetings are all about whether they want sidewalks or not. So, to me, that's all about trying to do complete streets, so.
Yep.
Maybe we don't have as much public outreach along those lines, but I think we're
I think we do a pretty good
trying
job.
to do it.
Agree.
The town council would need to pick up,
Anthony Rundle,
what's
I mean,
sidewalks.
We got fluff for
How long have we had that
sidewalks.
policy, and how easy is it to ride a bike along Sullivan Avenue?
Well, those are the leaders
How easy or how safe?
changing.
That's beyond our pay scale.
So, town center's an area where you have made some improvements, especially around sidewalks. I wanted to kind of talk about the roadway system in town center a little bit different tonight. The last plan was focused more on connectivity. And those are all great and I think still relevant for this plan. An additional kind of priority that I see that could benefit the town center is a greater focus on streetscapes. So that's kind of enhanced design, especially, you have village type zoning, you have that, that goal to transform that area into, a walkable village with complete streets. And the public infrastructure is a really important part of that. And so I've just created this little graphic here highlighting in green what we see as the streetscape priorities. These are really your main entry points into town center. These are mostly state roads. The south leg here on Buckland Road is town owned. But a streetscape would be, you have enhanced materials. So in addition to your, standard sidewalk, maybe you have sidewalk edge, maybe you have street trees, you have decorative lighting, you have signage that's all consistent. And I think one of the opportunities for town center especially is when you start coordinating streetscape elements in the public realm with some of those same elements on your private development sites. So as you have a redevelopment that happens, they're using the same materials, they're using the same trees, they're using the same lights. And you start to build that identity that you are in one place, not just in X shopping center and Y shopping center.
So if we adopt the town center, if we have criteria for certain type of lampposts, right? And, stamped concrete to simulate cobble or brick. As a developer comes in, that becomes part of the, that would be on us, not for architectural review, right? We would say, if you're gonna build here, you need to comply with
These public improvement
of what we're trying.
specs.
Okay, so we just have to
Be more specific.
write them and be able to put teeth into it without having somebody sue us for saying, you gotta do this.
I mean, in your village district regulations, that whole statutory process gives you more control over some of those aesthetic pieces. So, you know, lighting, materials, et cetera.
I
You know,
just
one
had,
other, go ahead.
I'm sorry, one comment, where it says Town Center Plaza in black, the light blue or turquoise arrow to the left of that, there is nothing there. Could we have that removed?
But you know, Bart, that is a lot though, right? That's a Rockville Bank lot that's owned there, and potentially that could be a developed piece of.
Wetlands right there.
But didn't we talk
There's a
about a
pond
bridge?
to the right of it, and there's the building, and the parking lot for the post office to the left of it.
We did talk
You can't
about,
put a footbridge over that and
we
walk
did talk
there?
about a bridge.
Footbridge?
We brought that up.
I
We did.
Yeah,
We
roadway,
all
it certainly
talked
wouldn't
about
make
it.
sense
no,
there,
there was
but
certainly been a
but
roadway.
bike ped, you know, especially if, I think this is Clark Street right here, right?
Correct.
So this is definitely an area where if I lived in Clark Street, I wanted to get to Town Center Plaza. It's not really a good, easy way to get there without taking kind of a roundabout route. You know, certainly it wouldn't be anything too intense or that would impact the wetlands, but, you
You
know.
don't remember that?
I,
Does anybody else remember talking about this?
I remember, yeah.
I remember that we had shown something like that,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's realistic.
Thing,
I don't
so.
think it's realistic. I think that's $1 million project.
$1 million dog.
Shit, we get a donation from these big box warehouses we got.
Maybe
Come
some
on.
irrigation company will give
Yeah.
something.
First of all, it's all private property, so it really wouldn't be a town project. so
You're
much.
right.
It's gonna be something that gets done.
So on the sidewalks, I can tell you the biking community would definitely like to see wider paved bike paths on Ellington Road, Oakland Road, you know, especially Buckland and Ellington and Sullivan. Now there's some issues with space available between the property line and the road and the snow shelf, but these are things that can be solved if we prioritize them.
I think there's also a consideration for speed, that, you know, if you widen a shoulder visually as a driver, that's gonna cue you to probably drive faster than on a narrow road. So I know that's always a fine balance of, if you have the wide shoulder, is that gonna encourage other behavior that actually makes cyclists or
No, I'm not talking about shoulder, I'm talking about a path that's off the road.
off the road? Okay.
Because bike paths on roads are really pretty ineffective and a lot of people are getting killed using them.
So let's get to that actually as part of the biking. So this is just some examples here. I'll skip over this. So your Walking Wheelways plan is a great document. I think it establishes that overarching vision. I think one of the ways that this plan can kind of take that a step further is to prioritize. I think the Walking Wheelways plan is, in 40 years from now, if we look back and see what we want to accomplish, this is, you know, what we aspire to be. In our 10-year window, you know, this is the way that I've kind of thought about pedestrians and cycling, is to think of through the users and which users are we going to focus on. Are we focus more on our recreational cyclists or people that are just going out for a jog, where, you know, that infrastructure is going to be more of an amenity? Are we looking to reduce auto dependency, so try to get some mode shift? We're focused on people that may drive, but we have infrastructure that supports biking and walking for those trips. Or are we focused on our captive users? So these are our folks that really don't have another choice. So you may have some older seniors, you may have school kids that have no other way of getting around.
Didn't we, there was conversation a few years back about working in collaboration with Eversource and their easements and their right-of-ways. I mean, that's safe passage. I mean, I
Well,
don't,
the
I don't
bike-
like, but
The Crosstown Trail is dominated by Eversource.
correct.
And they
That's the
met with us, we walked it down, we're not using all Eversource property, but yeah, that whole north-south corridor under their power lines, and they're very cooperative in that particular,
Shows up on page
That's right.
35. It shows up on your page 35.
But I don't know where that ever, like, I know you might have had conversations, but how about funding? Who would?
we got $1.2 million out of the legislature just a
Start.
couple of weeks ago to build part of that walkway, part of that path.
Supposedly from Stanley Street to Niederwiffer.
Well, there's a lot of it.
So yeah, we have some maps and a couple of slides that'll show that in relation to some of your other data.
phase one.
No, phase 1A is part of that.
So how about thoughts on user groups, on who to prioritize?
I looked at that and my reaction was the demand is definitely stronger from the recreational users. So I think the strategy has to be to drag the other people along by serving the recreational users. I mean, there's hundreds of people who go biking in this town, you know, especially on the weekends, but even evenings and mornings. And I mean, that's where you're gonna get your political support, and that's where you're actually getting the usage. You look at the bike trails in Simsbury, you know, that go from New Haven all the way up to Westfield. It's pretty much dominated by recreational. Whether it's taking your kid for a walk in a stroller or riding a bike for 40 miles, you know. So I think you drag the other people along. But as a culture, we're not there yet, and even people who don't own a car, I don't know how many there are, I don't know,
School
maybe you
kids,
know.
there's lots of school kids in town that don't get
Yeah.
bused. So they're kind of your main group, is to focus on that buffer, where if you don't have sidewalks, you're paying for transportation.
Mhm.
So,
Well, okay, I mean, kids, for sure, I know I rode my bike everywhere when I was a kid. And these were not the kind of roads we have now.
I think it'd be kind of interesting to see a map where our priorities kind of vary a little bit, because I think there are some priorities that maybe are for the people that are the captive users that maybe have to walk from the bus stop to work. You know, there may be some areas that are that in our town, that would be a different priority than like around the schools and branching out from the schools and getting more sidewalks so more kids can walk to the schools, to me is another high priority if you know, those are some of your goals. Because I think some of the things that we've struggled with at the staff level is from the Walk on Wheels perspective, everything's a priority and they want 10-foot wide paths everywhere, and that's just not realistic. So we're trying to get to where we can, you know, because we're starting to see some funds that the town has for building sidewalks. So I know at the staff level, we're trying to get to some more realistic priorities that we can, you know, that make sense and that we can start chipping away at. So I'd like to hopefully see us look at a little bit.
here's maybe a way of looking at it too, in terms of, you have kind of different funding strategies. You have your CIP and you have your road bond. Maybe that money is spent more towards these groups, but then the town says, when we go after grants, like the $1.2 million you got, we're gonna focus on these. Where you do have other funding opportunities for recreational trails that you don't get for, you know, just building a sidewalk. So it might be strategic in terms of trying to maximize your opportunities for other funds, and developing a strategy around that. So maybe, you know, Crosstown Trail is don't spend a lot of CIP or road bond money on it, but this is something we want to apply for a recreational trails grant or steep or whatever, over other projects.
I do think that it is a priority to finish connecting up the sidewalks to the schools.
So this is a map showing the existing sidewalk network. There would be a couple of new ones that are, you know, or that were built as construction season that are on here. And then we have the priorities from the 2014 plan. We kind of talked internally as a team about maybe making this a little bit more lobby. So rather than focus on specific roads, we have kind of areas that we call out. You know, buffers around schools that align with your walk sheds or your, your bus policies, your business districts, obviously. And then there may be some corridors where we do kind of keep that linear connection because those are, right now you have, areas where you do have a lot of sidewalks, but you're missing some of those longer connections to get from one sidewalk area to the next sidewalk area to the next one.
And is there some way to delineate or to show sidewalks that don't connect that are near a bus stop, for example? And I know bus stops can maybe change over the years, but
Are you talking about the public bus stops? You mean? Public
no,
bus
school
stops?
bus, I'm
School
sorry,
bus.
school bus.
You know, school buses aren't a good thing to use because she does change them quite frequently, you know.
Looking at this map, it looks like around
I could
Orchard.
ask her, though, I could ask for a list of locations from the
Yeah.
school that would be beneficial.
Yeah, and it's,
Maybe,
She'd offer that.
maybe building off of what she said, show the school areas with some kind of a
Radius.
Mhm.
radius or something
half
on the
mile or
map.
whatever the policy is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What is the policy?
It
Depending
varies
on your
by
age.
town, and some towns have an exception if it's like, if there's no safe way, even though you live close, we'll bus you anyway, so I'll have to dig into
Yeah, if you
that.
have to cross the street, I mean, there's a lot of things that get you a bus.
Just as a point, on the map, it shows Beelzebub not having a sidewalk, but it does
Okay,
Well,
Yeah.
now,
now.
His,
This was the old
I
plan.
owe him a
Oh, okay.
map.
but
Oh, it's-
I,
An updated
it's good to
map.
point it out because
Mhm.
he can change it for the new plan.
that's what I'm thinking.
I'd also like to document how much sidewalk we've built since the last plan,
Mhm.
because I think we've done quite a bit of sidewalk
Yep.
construction, with our development, so
Yeah,
that
take
could
a
be something
kudo,
maybe we can
absolutely.
Well, that's,
highlight.
like we just mentioned, all has to be updated.
Yeah, and we have one updated that it's just not finalized yet, so we didn't put it in here yet, so we'll, it's not that it's not.
In your
Posted them.
spare time.
No, it's actually done through engineering. We've been having some discussions upstairs as to where this map should live, and engineering is really the best place for it to live, because they're the ones doing the most sidewalk work right now. The GIS can get updated and go to walk and wheelways for priority, so we're trying to just, make it so that we're working off of one map. But I like the idea of the blobs, because, sometimes people want you to look at this map and say, well, it doesn't show a priority sidewalk, we don't have to do it here. And really it gets away from what the intent of the map is, and so
Right.
I'd almost rather have the blobs with like some verbiage of what this means. We wanna try to provide as much sidewalk around our schools as we can within a certain mileage, or, rather than, it's not showing up on this road, we don't have to do a sidewalk, which is how people wanna interpret the map, so.
It's like
And-
from Pleasant Valley, across the church property, there's no sidewalk. So I had a parent stop me the other day to point out that he's walking these two little kids to pop across the grass.
We actually have, part of the ARPA funds, we are reaching out to the church and we're trying to do 2 linkages of sidewalk, one on Long Hill and one from the school driveway down to the intersection.
Oh, good.
So that is something that we are in the process of doing as well as Dart Hill. Those are 2 projects, sidewalk projects with ARPA funds that are moving forward.
I gotta say too, back on the last slide, the Sullivan Avenue, it should be a priority to complete it in between where it's, showing it just as green on one side. I mean, if the state project comes up and they look at our map and say, oh, we don't have to do it, well, they should do it.
Yep.
It should be part of, the priorities.
yeah, so I think doing kind of the blob, we could extend the blob all the way along Sullivan Ave, and I think that'll kind of close the gaps and to your point, Bart, make sure that we're not sending messages that aren't consistent with what you wanna do.
And like there's a little spot on Deming, between Deming and like Buckland and Deming where it goes like near Costco.
Mhm.
And it's showing sidewalk there, but it's not in red for some reason. And maybe it's on one side already.
Maybe, so yeah, we'll certainly.
We'll have to clean
Yeah,
up this
yeah,
map.
we'll
It's
clean up
definitely-
this map, we'll make sure we have all the new stuff
Yeah.
once engineering gets that to us, and then we'll take that more generalized approach for the priority areas.
And I
Is
don't want,
there-
go ahead. I don't wanna belabor this, but we talk sidewalks. How about streetlights? Do we have anything that says, you know, we should have streetlights here and we don't?
Eversource decides where streetlights go.
We don't have any influence on
Well,
that.
I know that our police will work with Eversource because they've, you know, they're the ones that get the phone calls that their streets aren't dark or light enough. So I know that, for example, South Windsor Estates, they had, or Estates of South Windsor, they had another light added there. But when you approve a subdivision, it goes to Eversource and they work with the police on locating them.
Right,
So you
right.
really don't have, they have their own standards that they apply.
I've been working on this for a year and a half in the same area where the sidewalk stops, where the bus stop is, and it's a terrible corner, and there's an easement into the power lines. It's a perfect storm, and I can't get anybody to talk about it. So I don't know, I'm just trying to think, maybe if we get it on a map somehow.
Call Tom's only.
What's ECG?
East Coast Greenway.
They'll tell you.
Okay.
This map shows the walk and wheelways, on-road bike routes. This spoke to kind of Steve's, some of the things Steve was talking about earlier of having, you know, roads that accommodates bikers, you know, some of the roads that Steve mentioned earlier. You know, looking at this map, I think this is a good long-term vision, and we can set some priorities, you know, for that nearer-term horizon. I also threw the Crosstown Trail on here, and I think, you know, that really is going to serve as your central artery, and, you know, is going to be the way that people get to, you know, Nevers Park, the high school, short distance away, town center. There'll hopefully be a way to connect that to Evergreen Walk, so it will hopefully be able to connect many of those major destinations. Some of the other priorities that stuck out to us is two opportunities then to further connect into the regional greenway system. So the Manchester Trail system stops right here on the town border, and there is a path that connects, you know, you to Charter Oak Trail, Hop River Trail, all the way out to, you know, almost the Rhode Island border on a bike path.
Wow.
And similarly, the Bissell Bridge, you know, you have the trail on the side of that, and Windsor just got a grant to extend their riverfront trail, I believe, connecting all the way to Hartford. And I see these two connection points as how do we get people from the Crosstown Trail here, and then maybe, and I think the other one with that is how do we get people across Route 5 to that trail on the Bissell Bridge. Right now, I think it's Chapel Road has some straight.
Chapel Road hits Main Street. You got a couple hundred yards, I think, down to the Bissell Bridge. It's pretty convenient, actually.
Main Street's great to bike on.
Yeah, Main Street is very popular for biking. One thing about the Crosstown Trail, where it crosses Sullivan Avenue, you can't get from there to Town Center on a, you know, without riding on Sullivan Avenue proper. There's no sidewalk, you know, so that's gonna be a priority, I
Yep,
think.
certainly.
So, quick question for you, where you got your star there, and you got a point of interest down by the Connecticut River. Explain to me who told you that that was a point of interest?
This is just the map from Walk and Wheelways. So that's the boat launch, I think.
If that's what you wanna call it, that's why I'm saying it sarcastically,
Yeah.
because
It's yeah,
the town has done.
it's
There was
underwater.
some bid out for
Nothing.
that reason. Just the other day I was told. They're doing
Really?
something down there. Yeah, John Caldwell told me something's going on down
To
there.
do what, dredge the
I
muck
don't-
off of it?
I don't know what, but there's something going on.
The
for
idea
bodies.
would
I'll
be
find
to
out.
have
I'll let you know.
All right, we're almost there.
a path along the river.
Holy.
Just, if you could clear that ECG.
Sure.
We don't need an acronym there.
Yep, you got
Okay,
it.
thank you. Sorry, Steve, did you?
Like it.
No, I think that we need a path along the river, at some point, maybe not in the next 10 years, but
They don't, well, I think you're gonna get pushback from, you will definitely get pushback from all the local farms, because they get enough problems down there, like lots of problems.
like
Soon as you make that, just last week, they had a major rescue, their biker, like, didn't belong there, like, it's,
Really?
yeah, you will, that will come with a lot of opposition.
Yeah.
Trust me when I tell you.
So yeah, I think if you guys complete the Crosstown Trail in 10 years, all those segments, that would be an accomplishment. These take time, multiple phases, engineering, securing easements. So I think putting your eggs in that basket is certainly, a good approach. And then maybe a secondary is making those regional connections. And then maybe the third is you're just opportunistic of, an opportunity arises. All
I
right.
think, that regional connection down there, I think the plan now is, you come down Clark Street to Chapel. There's a missing segment, which I think is being built, right, Michelle?
On Clark Street?
No, on Chapel.
Oh, yeah, in Chapel there, yes, we had funds to do the community connections, we did all the, ones on Clark, on Chapel.
So you should be able, at this point, to get from Clark Street all the way into Willimantic or whatever, okay? Just because that one little section is missing, a pretty nice bike trail along the street on the Manchester end. So I think that connection is almost already done.
Is that the piece that goes in front of Hartford Distributors? Is that like what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
That connection, okay.
We're almost there. So in terms of pedestrian cycling, I think it's taking that Walks and Wheelways vision, establishing those 10-year priorities, near-term priorities, the goal of giving greater walking and biking options. You have your sidewalk plan through your road bond, also upgrading that to meet ADA standards. One thing that often I think gets overlooked is when you're replacing a bridge or a culvert, even if there's no sidewalk on there today, it's good to make it a little wider so that if you ever do, you have room to do it. I know on Sullivan Ave you have a case of that. It's expensive to retrofit. Crosstown Trail, completing that being a priority, taking a phased approach and also looking at those connector routes. To your point, Steve, we're missing a safe way to get from the trail to the town center, and then bolster connections to the regional greenway. Transit service. So right now you have service on a loop on Main Street and Route 5, which is actually doesn't go all the way to Hartford. I think you have to transfer in Windsor, and then you have actually no, that's this service, Route 92, which goes to Buckland and Town Center. That is not a route that goes directly to Hartford. So the Main Street corridor in particular to me is a little bit puzzling, just given the development patterns there. I know there's a history there with being a trolley line, Michelle told me. But looking at transit, I think an important thing is your land use policies and where you have density that supports transit use. So we know that a lot of your transit riders today are working at the distribution facilities. So very dense, you have a lot of riders going to the same spot. That's what bus transit providers love. It's efficient, you can fill space. Some lower density areas, I think, is where it's going to be more of a struggle to advocate for service, just because the demand is going to be pretty low and you don't have kind of those activity nodes outside of maybe a town center and Buckland Road Evergreen Walk area. And so I think that's part of the conversation is, this plan has some visions about, higher density development in certain areas. I think that needs to be part of your case, is we have land use policies that are dense enough to justify transit service. Because if you just ask for a bus, they're probably gonna say, nope.
So why are we running a bus down Main Street?
Because there was a trolley line there a long time ago, is the explanation.
It's always been.
Why do we need to continue that?
It's a great question.
You know what?
Tradition.
There's a lot of people that use that bus line on Main Street.
There's a lot of boarding
It's
rentals.
kind of shocking. And it's weird because the people come, like, there's one right in front of my house, almost.
Yeah.
And people, however they come down Chapel Road and they wait at that stop because it's,
Yeah, but I mean, are they Main Street people or
No.
are they people on
Oh,
its
they're-
route?
it's a variety, but there's people that will come down Chapel Road to get onto that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking move that over to somewhere where there's more demand.
Probably Sullivan Avenue. Well, Sullivan Avenue with Mobile Hondas or whatever it is, the FedEx, the new building coming in. It's prioritizing would be, yes, Sullivan Avenue would be a home run.
So back in 2017, there was a study that looked at all the routes, and this is their recommended map, which I think does a lot of the stuff you guys just talked about.
there's
Takes the bus off Main Street and does a loop on Route 5, Sullivan Ave, ending at Buckland Hills Mall, which kind of serves as
Perfect.
the regional node. So again, this is something DOT controls. You're kind of more of an advocacy lobbying role as the town, but having it in your plan, I think this is a sound approach. Last mile connections, or in this case, probably last couple 100-yard connections, is gonna be also really important, especially at some of the distribution centers where you may not have a sidewalk that takes folks to their front door. And then another option for areas where maybe you don't have the density to justify service, there's kind of some new thoughts on, running a bus is very expensive. Some communities have started looking at things like transportation wallets, where they say, you know what, we have a low-income population that needs to get around. Rather than running a bus, we're gonna give them a $100 voucher every month that they can use on bus, Uber, however they want. And it kind of is a less expensive approach in that folks kind of gravitate towards existing services. So something to maybe consider, especially if you have, senior housing in an area where you don't have those transit options.
I can tell you that I'm familiar with the chair of the Transportation Commission, and she really liked what she saw here.
They sent us a questionnaire, so that always helps when we kind of know what their priorities are. We can incorporate their stuff.
So can you go back to that just for a quick second? So the line on Chapel Road, so from, I'm trying to read this here, I can't see that good here.
It's over 291.
Yep, 291 gets off
That's
the
a
highway.
recommended one now.
Yep.
So Ellington, yeah, no, I understand, but to get to, so we have it covered, like for this one, we have it covered for Sullivan Avenue, which again, for people that work at some of these distribution centers, it's perfect. But then to get to the Coca-Cola, the Home Depot,
Yeah, you probably want to get this triangle in here on Ellington Road, right?
if there is a way to,
Yeah, this is just the
because that
graphic from their
DST Output
study.
Technologies also,
Yep.
there's a lot
Because
of,
they did change that, the bus service did change along
I think they
Ellington.
did- I think they
Yeah, no,
did
we
put
got a
a route
notice
in
not too long
Ellington, yeah.
ago, they did change it, so it does come up Ellington.
Yeah, this study's
so
before those
that
ones
hits
as well.
DST, it hits,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
They did change that, I would say last year, maybe.
The other thing you'd wanna do though is make that a node, so that if somebody wanted to switch bus lines from orange to purple, they could do so.
They could do
now
so,
they
yeah.
can,
Oh, that's cool.
And then freight rail, you have some businesses that take advantage of that asset. I think it's a little underutilized.
You're kidding me?
You know?
Is this, are we
He
being,
lives right here.
are we being punked here right now?
Unless you live down on Chapel Road.
Correct.
Okay, then.
Or Main Street, yeah, like, tell me, don't, man.
But in terms of freight movement, obviously,
doing it.
we know the challenges around trucks.
To the train all the time.
So
You know what I'm doing under this table right now?
it's a privately owned rail line for most of the area in South Windsor. So again, it's, there's minimal in the town's control or even in DOT's control, other than making sure the right of way is maintained, you have safe crossings, operations are done
Slow.
efficiently. Yeah, they're slow. Most of the private rail lines are very slow right now. But again, it's an asset, maybe underutilized, maybe not, depending on where you live. All right, so we have a couple minutes. So talking with Michelle and talking with our Glenn and Mike from my team, we kind of talked about this idea of focusing our special focus on kind of a larger idea of growth management, which encapsulates, I think, a lot of the stuff we've talked about in the various plan elements. And as we've gone through the 4 plan elements, we've noticed some inconsistencies in terms of where do we want to develop and where do we want to conserve. And we think growth management can help bring all of those into better alignment so that we're very clear on our zoning map, our sewer map, our open space priorities are all kind of talking to each other and telling the same story rather than having conflicts. We talked about the sewer service approach today. It sounds like that's something that has some legs that we can certainly explore further as part of that special focus. Certainly would want to engage the WPCA as part of that conversation as well. address any inconsistencies with sewer policy areas, so making sure zoning and sewer align. And then also coordinating open space strategy, right? I mean, our sewer service and zoning maps essentially become almost our priority development areas and our priority conservation areas. So is there a way of targeting then our open space acquisition to those priority conservation areas? So we think it can kind of be a multiple part conversation that can tackle a bunch of, different items at the same time. Just wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I think the concern of the sewer and the zoning and combining the two so that we don't, there's so many parts to what's going on. Everybody's worried about, hitting this 10% goal for affordable housing. We need to get rid of, we kind of have to, our infrastructure can't handle, there's wants and needs and goals, right? And we kind of, the threat of the 10% kind of has to take a back seat to our infrastructure. First and foremost, we have to worry about what we have first, instead of appeasing the state of Connecticut. And I think having the sewer information in the study to work with on zoning will help us as far as how do we grow?
And I think too,
Smartly.
to some of our conversation around Clark Street as well, I think it can, specifically for that sewer shed, it's where do we want to prioritize the remaining capacity there? And that can inform special permit or zone change requests as well. So I think that's all stuff that we can capture as part of this. We'd also talked about establishing a PA 490 local option, which you currently don't have. And that allows you to set your own parameters on properties that can qualify for a tax break through the Public Act 490 special assessment. So right now, the state has parcels that automatically get put in the program. I believe it's 20 acres, Glenn? 25 acre minimum lot size.
25 is for forest and 10 for farm.
And so you have a lot of parcels that, are important but may not meet those state criteria. And so the state's given municipalities the option of setting your own local criteria. And again, we think that can be a strategy it's a disincentive to develop that may be good to implement in certain areas. This could be geographic based, it could be global, it can be.
Can you dumb me that down for me?
Okay.
Like,
So
490.
Public Act 490 gives property owners of forest and farmland a significant reduction in their local tax assessments.
Okay.
If a PA 490 property were to be developed, they would have to pay a penalty. I think it's a 5-year cycle.
I think a 10-year cycle.
10-year
So
cycle.
for 10 years, within it, 10 years, if you do development, then you pay back the taxes that you should
If you
have.
take advantage of,
Right, if you take advantage of the program, there's a 10-year period that if you sell or develop the property, a portion of the taxes foregone needs to be paid as a penalty. It's not one for one, it's a declining number. But it makes undeveloped land less expensive to own. And so as a result, land will not go into development, people are likely to hold on to it. So if we're trying to moderate growth or development, a PA 490 local option could be an option for South Windsor to consider as part of this. It's not a simple equation or simple conversation, but I think in some of these issues, we think our open space, our open space strategy is not as focused as we might want it to be. Our sewer strategy isn't focused as we might want it to be, and our zoning strategy doesn't really coordinate with the other two. So I think what Pat's suggesting here is sort of this growth management concept, which is let's take a look at those things and figure out how to coordinate them better. I think the PA 490 could be a supplement to that if we wanted to manage growth and try to hang on to undeveloped land longer.
I think I think for the, I guess, this would have no bearings in the South Windsor Meadows because it can never be developed. So that would be
No, but on the other side of the street, you know, where you do
Correct.
have developable land, if
Right.
someone wanted to take their farmland and say, no, I'm gonna keep it,
I
and
think
it's not in a
I think-
490.
I think it's more, you know,
But, you know, Main Street's one area, but I know someone who's bought a big piece of property that's developable, that doesn't wanna develop it, but he would like to see a tax break, and then he'll keep it out of
Right,
development, you know?
right.
So, I mean, I think there may be some other areas in town where you don't even think about that, there may be some opportunity.
What are the respective size requirements for forest and farm?
5 and 10.
25 and 10.
25 and 10?
I think Enfield just put one into place, I just happened to see in the paper, the same thing right here, and there are 3 acres of open space was gonna qualify you, so they were having a public meeting about it like 2 weeks ago.
That makes more sense. I mean, cause, you know, if you have a building lot, say you're paying well, not
And
if
you don't get a school kid, cause they didn't make a lot, you know, I mean, who knows?
Right.
It could be something to try.
What were they using?
3 acres is what I believe the Enfield
3
was.
acres.
Yeah,
Okay, because when you have a reduction like that, I mean, the total town tax bill is still there. If you give a reduction, that's gotta be made up someplace else, which it's for the greater good of the town to have that stuff not
you
developed.
gotta
But
balance what
you gotta remember, if you get down to something like 3 acres,
that might be
it's
too
a
small.
larger bowl.
And we can start putting some data together as how much is there vacant land that's 5 acres? I mean, we
Right,
can
right,
do those
right,
kinds of
right.
5,
analysis.
10.
Sure.
And some towns
So we can
relate the
create our own
threshold,
criteria for our community?
what's called local option.
Okay.
So some towns relate it to the zoning. So for example, if a parcel's in a 1 acre zone, the minimum lot size might be 3 acres or 5 acres or a different number. So, but if you're in a half acre zone, the threshold might be different. So, I mean, this all came out of Public Act in 1964. So PA 490 has been around since then. And so, this option might have some applicability in South Windsor because of some of the issues that you're facing.
I don't know. I don't really, yeah, I think, you know, when you're a developer coming into town and they walk up to somebody that has 25 acres of forest and they go, well, you can still live the lifestyle you're living, or you can sell me that 25 acres, and I think they'll be like, I'll pay that penalty, you know, but it's worth a shot, I guess. Especially like you said, if you have somebody that comes in and buys land and say, listen, I wanna
They
preserve
wanna
it.
keep it out of development, they
Yeah.
don't want a neighbor, but
Right.
you know, it's costing them a lot in tax dollars.
Yeah, so it's,
So we'll work with Michelle to try to figure out the next steps around that. I think we do have one floating meeting budgeted that we don't have shown on our timeline here. I think devoting that to the special focus area, maybe inviting WPCA, may be a good way of using that meeting.
But also Open Space Task Force, you said, starting to,
I think we'll have to strategize on how many.
Yeah, I don't know if I think the Open Space Task Force, we got a representative from, I mean, they just did their plans, we know where their plan is. We have an updated plan from them. I think it's really how we execute.
I think WPCA definitely needs fairly lengthy discussion, whether it's an hour or 2, I don't know.
Yep, so I can follow up with you, Michelle,
Yeah,
on some potential dates on that. So looking at our next steps, I think that really becomes the cornerstone of our future land use plan, our policy map. So we'll really flush that out as part of that special focus study, and concurrently, we'll start doing goals, objectives, strategies that are kind of outside of the special focus realm. And our goal is to have work sessions with you. We have 2 work sessions to go over the goals, objectives, strategies. We'll figure out a way of kind of breaking that up, whether let's start with the goals first, and then second meeting we get more specific or topic. And then, as I mentioned before, doing that second round of public input in early 2024. So we have a late May, early June adoption. The state does require a 65-day public comment period, so I always work backwards from our adoption date on when we want to complete the plan. So if we do that, we would be aiming for really early March to have a complete draft plan adopted. So we got a little bit of work to do, but we're in good shape.
So do we wanna try to plan our December meeting now? Cause for the growth management? Because it really, we have a regular scheduled meeting on the 12th. So the 5th would be the first Tuesday, and the 19th would be the third Tuesday.
I'm just pulling out my calendar here.
Such a busy guy. You got pickleball that night?
Thursday?
Tuesday the 5th.
I'll be gone on the fifth, but nineteenth works.
So WPCA meets on the fifth.
Can't do the fifth.
Don't know if we can,
Do we
how
have
long
to-
of a discussion would you need? Do you think we need with that?
Are you looking at the 5th to meet with like
Well,
WPCA
we're talking
or
about doing our next
a other
schedule
specific?
for the growth management meeting that we're
Okay, so
talking about.
she's looking at something different.
Well, yeah, but
We're looking at maybe adding to that calendar for a meeting with like WPCA, right?
Or alternatively, we could do that at our regularly scheduled December meeting, and then do a January meeting where we do January, February for the goals, objectives, strategies too. That's another option.
Yeah, maybe we wanna do that so that we have it all kind of
Yeah.
decided what we wanna do
Where's
for
our
goals and
regular
strategies.
meeting?
And that would be in conjunction with
The
WPCA?
growth management part.
So, and then would that study be done? Not by then.
The Clark Street one?
Do we just have one meeting in
I'll
December?
have to follow up with Tony. I don't think so. I think they, Steve,
one
do you know if
meeting,
they
P and
just put
Z
the
in
funding
December?
request in?
it's funded.
It's funded, okay.
Exactly when it's gonna finish, I don't know, but it's funded, it's going.
So regardless, I think I owe Tony a follow-up to get just some more details around.
I mean, that would be really, I mean, I don't,
Well, maybe we should decide then if we wanna have that for the meeting or not. Maybe wait till January.
You know, let me comment on the Clark Street study is going to lead to a reduction in flows through that pump station, because we're gonna fix the inflows, issue. You can count on that, okay? Whether we have to wait for that study,
no,
I don't
I'm
think
just,
so, yeah.
I don't need to wait for it, I just,
I'm just suggesting maybe we figure out what really works for us schedule-wise and let the study take care of its own.
then let's, anytime, well, we have a regular meeting on the 19th,
12th.
or the 12th.
12th.
Of
December.
So if we were to be able to do the 5th, maybe we won't do our growth management until January, so we see where our
Yeah.
WPCA, the 5th, maybe we do the goals and strategies.
I can't be there the 5th.
The
If you do the
19th,
5th, I'll be in the WPCA
Nineteenth I
meeting.
can do. I can't do the 5th.
19th.
I think I have that on my calendar.
19th of our party.
I'll probably be out of town by the 19th, so I don't know.
Well, that's late for Christmas. I'm sorry.
And the
No,
health-
What do you
It's
do
our
in
party.
November?
Yeah, we gotta schedule something. I mean, this is the time to talk about it, right?
Let's just see, November.
Unless we don't do it on a Tuesday.
Just a little housekeeping, just for the record. I'm gonna see, let's see, what the heck? I swear to God, I just wrote something here. Oh, Commissioner Bernstein for Commissioner LeBlanc and Commissioner Carey for Commissioner Cavagnaro for voting purposes.
So,
Are we voting on something today?
Motion to adjourn, yeah.
Yeah, Michelle, maybe I'll.
what did we decide about the schedule?
Otherwise, we're gonna be stuck
We'll
here all
coordinate
night.
with
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we'll figure out something.
Yeah, it's either gonna have to be the 5th or the 19th, so we're gonna have to figure out. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Depending on where you are, we could even maybe do it the 12th, because you don't have much pending right now as far as applications going, so we could do it on a regular meeting night.
I like
Are you
that.
available the 12th?
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts.
I think I have every Tuesday.
We'll still be
in
talking
December.
Denver.
I mean, in all seriousness, the only thing we have
Fine.
pending right now is your 240
Which one?
Deming. And
Deming Road,
anything that comes in, you know,
they just put the.
we could probably do that right
Request
now.
in for the
Okay.
55
We'll hold it, and
units.
then we'll.
Yeah,
finalize
when we
it.
tentatively plan on the
No,
12th,
Okay.
no,
And
as
not
your
the
regular
19th?
meening being that,
Now they are
And not the
forward
19th?
and not the
So
19th.
what it's gonna be.
And then I'll
That
just,
should go
we'll see
through.
where things go, but I really don't know of anything
We make it drag.
on its way in, so
Okay.
Good.
we might be able to do that. Keep our fingers crossed.
So put the
240
19th
Deming,
down for our
what's
party.
going on there?
Okay.
Is it the site plan or?
Yes, I.
Yeah, now they have the site plan, just got submitted.
Okay, so does that complete our business tonight? Okay, if
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
we have motion and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes.
Turn off the.
Already chose.
Okay.